All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are Brutus AI, and we want to ensure that data never betrays you again. I'm Julius. I'm a statistics researcher and student at UC Berkeley. And in my countless data science project, I've had a huge issue. I spent hours of time and nerve-wracking nights cleaning vast and dirty data sets. And we found this theme, and we all agreed, given our backgrounds as founders and data scientists, that we can resonate with this issue quite a lot. We all spend 80% of our time cleaning data. And this is a common issue. It has been an issue for decades. So when we look at, for example, this data set, this is actually something that I had to deal with, unstructured tabular data. And it took me just hours to clean it and transform it into a simple map showcasing CO2 per capita data, right? Doesn't seem to be crazy. I didn't sleep that night. Right? And we looked at existing solutions. We got together and we were like, it can't be that hard to solve. But it actually is. Because when you look at no-code data tools, which are kind of popping up everywhere here and then, there are two main issues. Firstly, you have to get accustomed to a whole new interface and kind of have to relearn the tool every time you try something new. And secondly, you are very limited in your data cleaning abilities. Then there's the other side of the equation. Standard extract, transform, and load models. And if you don't know Python or R in detail, well, you can't even use them. So we realized with recent advancements in large language models, we can push the frontier of what's possible in terms of data cleaning and data insights. And this is what Brutus AI is for.
Brutus is the first GPT-driven data science copilot that lets you 10x the speed, quality, and power of your data cleaning process. Let's walk through a quick demo to show exactly what happens. Do you remember that data set from earlier when we looked at a bunch of countries and, like Julie said, it took us 8 hours to deal with that? Here's the data set visualized for all of you. As you can see, there's a ton of rows and columns. There's lots and lots of data that's hard to deal with. After just one click, we can generate some recommendations to try and clean this faster. The first one says show population and GDP columns in millions. And after clicking C script, you can see exactly what is recommended by the algorithm. And after just one click and a few seconds, the population and GDP columns are converted into much more understandable numbers. And as you can see here, there are more recommendations. For example, drop rows with null values. And besides that, even graphical recommendations. For example, like plot the CO2 per capita column on a world map, latest available year. As you can see, all of the data has been updated accordingly. Now on the right-hand side, we have a natural language interface. For example, we ask, what country has the highest average population? And after analyzing the data, we've managed to reduce hallucinations to the point where we can ask questions and receive accurate answers within seconds. And finally, we can use this graphical interface, which we've built into the backend, to recommend graphs. So for example, just after a second, you'll see here that we have CO2 emissions per capita 2021. So what does this do? This lets you 10x your data cleaning, meaning you can improve the speed, the control, and the intuitive UI through which you use your data cleaning. For example, as you can see, the recommendations are done much faster, and you're in control of the code that was generated. You can see exactly what's happening to your data and control real time. Without losing the technical ability, you can still use natural language, the first universal UI.
So let's talk a bit about our go-to-market strategy, right? And what we've seen so far, it is not as easy as you might think to find the right niche, because in the end of the day, yes, everybody needs data cleaning, but we wanted to find the perfect approach. And what we found that it makes sense for us to first build out our web app properly and work with startups and small and medium-sized businesses that do data collection and aggregation, such as climate tech startup, agriculture tech startups, right? Because in that case, their data is not proprietary, and we can use whatever data sets they upload, as well as their interactions with the interface to fine-tune our models first. This is phase one. And you might wonder, okay, what about the data mode, right? And we are lucky to call Moonshot AI, an Australian company, our first exclusive partner. You haven't heard of Moonshot AI? That's fine. But the Australian government works with Moonshot, and Moonshot helps them predict COVID cases, weather, and carbon footprint data. And we get access to hundreds of gigabytes of data, which they scrape and keep, stable on a daily basis, and can fine-tune our models and cleaning algorithms. And then, after getting HIPAA compliant, we plan to also expand into more regulated industries. It's meaning fintech first and eventually health tech companies. Use cases here could, for example, be, especially in fintech, helping credit score aggregation companies combine all these data sets they have, which they then sell to mid-sized banks, or for healthcare companies, medtech companies, to merge data science, medical records and surveys from trials. In the long term, we can use all this data to improve our cleaning recommendations as well as the underlying model.
We've talked to a lot of industry experts, and many of them have revealed significant interest. People at YouTube and Instacart said, make this today so that I can use it. And a director of CGen even said, this could help save lives. Elad, a VC on Twitter, even said, is anybody working on the data science copilot for the next gen data stack?
And you might think right now, well, okay, there are ChatGPT plugins, right? I can upload the data set and get some cleaning recommendations. But that's just the start. OpenAI is not here to build a new data suite. And we start right at the center here in terms of the data science journey at the stage of cleaning the data and providing first insights. But we believe with the advent and increase in importance of ethical, unbiased, and explainable AI models, that we can become the very first end-to-end data suite that helps you retrieve and collect the right data, web scrape the right data, then, as we've seen earlier, clean and transform it, and then even provide the proper AI models whilst being part of the entire data journey. We'd like to take you on this journey with us. And this is us, Brutus AI. Thank you so much for your attention.
Okay. Any questions either from in the room or online? If you guys are online, if you're interested, you can unmute yourself, and then everyone should be able to hear it in the room. Or if anyone, Tammy, yeah, do you want to? Let me. Yeah, the question was about like privacy and security.
Yeah, great question. So as mentioned earlier, we're starting with startups that have data aggregation practices. But as we continue to move into industries like fintech, insurance, health tech that require a greater standard, we're looking to build out solutions that integrate Kubernetes so that your personalization is localized while at the same time maintaining privacy standards.
Is your model proprietary, or are you using a third-party model?
Currently we're using a third-party model, but as we build this out, we're looking to fine-tune on the exact workflow of data scientists. So for example, as you continue to use the platform, it gets to know you better and it gets to know your practices better.
If you repeat the questions for
So just to repeat the question was about privacy and whether the model was proprietary or not.
Really interesting stuff. You guys mentioned the notion of an end-to-end solution for data scientists. The first thing that comes to my mind is pandas and just how awful it is to use. I don't know if that's something that has sort of popped up on your radar, but seems to me that might be part of an end-to-end solution, is reducing the pain and horrible UI sort of pandas.
Exactly. And I think we can definitely work with.
Repeat the question.
Oh, sorry. So the question was for everyone on Zoom, that it apparently should make sense to, replace pandas to a certain extent because it's a horrible to use. And yeah, we agree. We can, if you want to, we can write the pandas code for you, and you don't have to deal with the issue of writing it yourself, right? And I think one of the great advantages of Brutus is that you don't lose control. So you can, it generates these recommendations, it generates the underlying pandas code. And if you do want to change it, you can still see the script, but the large language model would never, change the data itself to avoid hallucinations.
Quick question on the Zoom. So how are you planning to service this this platform? Are people need to bring their data onto the platform, and is the data then needs to be imported back into where it is going to be used, and how is that going to go back and forth, and how often is that going to be done?
Am I supposed to press something? No, just can talk. Thank you for the question. I think right now what we've been building is a web app, which means that you can bring your own data to it. I think that's probably appropriate for smaller use cases, but it's quite clear that as you scale, you need to be able to plug directly into their warehouses or lakes and sort of be able to operate at that level. I think what's exciting about sort of the AI opportunity is that it just provides completely different paradigm for interacting with data. And it's not partial to, like some other sort of approaches, it's not partial to where things are. We can sort of, in some cases, have the data be brought in, and in other cases, just operate directly on top of the data. For example, in the case where the data remains let's say in a warehouse, maybe we write SQL code that directly, we help the user write SQL code that directly sort of modifies that. So I think, you have to be careful about prioritization. I think what we have right now is sort of the easiest first step, if you will. And I think as you sort of go to market and see where you have the biggest pull, you can sort of prioritize those things. So I hope that makes some sense.
It does. I think so. Your first, by the way, this is Lennon Gali from Git1K. So if I understand this, your first goal is to allow people to bring their data, process it, and give it back to them so that they can take it back. Is that right?
That is right. And just to clarify, one reason for that is this is sort of a brand new tech. And I think one of the important things that we could iterate as quickly as possible. So this is a very fast way to get going, to be able to ultimately perfect for what the kinds of things that we showed, right? For example, visualizations, editing code, generating insights. I think once you have a good handle on those, you can take those same things and sort of start bringing them to other places. For example, to a warehouse or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, so I hate fun as well. So
I'll just hand you this. That's probably easiest.
sort of I hate pandas as well, and sort of agree with you fully in this. But one good thing about pandas, it's open source, right? Any thoughts on open source, closed source models? How you're gonna push this to the public, right? Also, is it gonna be a Chrome extension to Jupyter Notebook, maybe, or a web app, right? A lot of questions, but yeah.
What's the deployment model?
Yeah, so in terms of kind of how we wanted to deploy it, we thought about a couple of things, right? We thought of open sourcing it, maybe even making it a Python library, but we've seen in the past that it's more difficult to commercialize that. And we think from a business standpoint, there are a couple of things, a couple of advantages to not open sourcing it or including it as an extension in Jupyter Notebook. I think the most important one is UI. What we saw, we had this first use case of, for example, a climate tech company where they work with very, heavy, with data intense applications, for example, collect carbon footprint data for companies. But usually they have very small and overloaded data science teams, right? And they might not have the capabilities to run it through a long Python script, but sometimes need to generate some first insights, and we can 10x the speed of that journey, right? And this kind of enhances the field of people that can use the tool. Otherwise, we'd be positioning within all these other ETL tools if we were to integrate that into Jupyter Notebook.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead. Yeah. I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Okay. I'll
Yeah.
be quick.
So in the data cleaning that you've experienced and as you were building this, were you prioritizing the data cleaning from an information theory perspective to maintain the dimensionality of the data, or to make it more human readable? And what do you think is a trade-off when we're using LLMs like these to kind of make it a trade-off between those two? And where do you think the sweet spot is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that one of the advantages of using an intelligent technology like this is the versatility and the personalizable nature of the platform. So let's say that, for example, you're a machine learning engineer. Using even a natural language interface will allow you to scale your data if necessary, deal with inputs, outputs, cleaning, dropping outliers, things of that nature. And if you're more on the business analyst side, using this data to create visualizations to present to business-oriented teams, then it's possible to do the same. And I think that naturally one of the trade-offs of using natural language is that there are risks of hallucinations, but we think that with the platform, the way we've interpreted this and implemented it, we've reduced that risk to close to zero. So our belief is that using this open natural language approach, we have the chance to personalize this to not only this very specific, highly technical use case, but also to one that isn't necessarily as technical.